We live in a world that moves fast. People make snap judgments, assumptions are instant, and impressions are formed in seconds. But respect doesn't work that way. It doesn't arrive because of a title, wealth, popularity, or volume. True respect is earned, slowly, and through repeated, observable behavior. It's not a single moment that defines how others see you, but a collection of moments that add up over time. Respect comes from alignment. The alignment between what we say and what we do. When our words and our actions are consistent, people begin to trust us, and once trust is formed, respect begins to follow. But this alignment needs to be repeated. Once or twice isn't enough. Respect is built the same way a brick wall is. One small act, one honest moment, one principled decision at a time. We can't selectively behave in ways that deserve respect and expect universal credit. You don't get to treat your team with kindness, and then scream at a waiter. You don't get to be humble in front of your boss and arrogant with your peers. People are always watching, even when we think they aren't. Consistency across situations reveals who we really are. If people sense a mask, they'll withhold their respect. Consistency is not the same as perfection. You don't have to be flawless to be respected. In fact, admitting fault can sometimes elevate respect. But what people look for is predictability in your character. Are you the kind of person who takes responsibility? Are you dependable? Do your values remain intact under pressure? Those questions are answered not by what you say, but by what you repeat. Leadership especially reveals the truth about consistency. Leaders don't earn respect because they have authority. They earn it when they show up for their people, when they listen, when they make sacrifices, when they lead by example. A leader who behaves with integrity only when the spotlight is on will lose the room when things get tough. But a leader who behaves the same way in the shadows earns the kind of respect that lasts. In personal relationships, consistency breeds emotional safety. When your partner, your friends, or your family know how you'll respond, when they can rely on your calm, your fairness, your honesty, they don't just respect you, they trust you deeply. Emotional respect is the result of consistent emotional presence. That kind of respect isn't loud. It doesn't show up in applause. It shows up in silence, when people feel safe to be themselves around you. Inconsistency, on the other hand, creates confusion. It leaves people guessing. And when people have to guess who you'll be today, they begin to protect themselves. They back away. They put up walls. You might still get politeness, but you won't get respect. Respect doesn't live in uncertainty. It lives in the quiet confidence that you are who you say you are, even when it's hard. And that's the key. It has to be hard. Consistency is only meaningful when it's tested. Anyone can be kind when things are easy. Anyone can be respectful when they're winning. But how do you act when you lose? How do you treat others when they disappoint you? How do you behave when there's nothing to gain? The answer to those questions writes the story of your respect in other people's eyes. Disrespect rarely erupts from a single moment. It's almost never one comment, one failure, or one bad day that causes people to lose respect for someone. More often it's a pattern, a slow erosion caused by repeated choices. These choices may seem small, even insignificant, but over time, they build a reputation. And that reputation becomes hard to reverse once it's cemented in the minds of others. When someone constantly interrupts others, it's not just rude. It signals that they don't value other people's perspectives. When someone consistently shows up late, it's not just poor time management. It sends the message that their time matters more than yours. These aren't just bad habits. They are patterns of behavior that slowly chip away at how others perceive us. Each repetition reinforces a silent message. You can't count on me. We tend to believe that respect is lost in dramatic moments. A betrayal, a lie, a major mistake. But those moments are often just the tipping point. The respect had already been weakening beneath the surface. People had already noticed the lack of accountability, the subtle selfishness, the refusal to listen. The final moment only confirmed what their gut had already been telling them. Habits have a way of becoming invisible to the person doing them. We normalize them. We explain them away. That's just how I talk. I'm just being honest. Well, they're too sensitive. But while we justify our patterns, others are forming judgments. We may not notice the respect slipping away, not because it's not happening, but because we're too close to our own behaviors to see their impact clearly. What's dangerous about these respect-eroding habits is that they usually offer short-term relief. Dodging responsibility feels easier than owning a mistake. Cutting someone off feels faster than listening. Dominating the room gives a rush of control. But each of those actions makes a silent withdrawal from the trust and regard people have for us. Over time, the account runs dry, and so does the respect. Some habits are born out of insecurity. We brag to cover our doubts. We criticize to avoid vulnerability. We pretend to know when we don't. But others aren't reading our intentions, they're reading our behavior. They're not giving us credit for what we meant to do, they're reacting to what we repeatedly do. And when what we do signals arrogance, apathy, or unreliability, people pull back their respect without needing a conversation. In teams, these habits become even more visible. One person who constantly complains, shifts blame, or breaks commitments can weaken the entire culture. It doesn't take long before others stop listening, stop sharing, stop engaging. Respect, once lost, doesn't just impact the individual, it contaminates the environment. People adapt by disengaging, by withholding trust, or by keeping their distance. The habit of one becomes the hesitation of many. People want to respect others. It makes collaboration easier, relationships smoother, and life more meaningful. But they can't respect what they can't rely on. And that's what habits reveal. They show who we are when we're not thinking, when we're not trying, when we're just being ourselves. If those habits say, I'm not consistent, I don't care, I won't change, people will quietly start to walk away from the respect they once had. Trust doesn't thrive in clutter. When our behaviors are dominated by defensiveness, sarcasm, blame, or manipulation, we unknowingly build walls between ourselves and others. These behaviors might serve as protection or control in the moment, but they create an emotional fog, one that makes it hard for trust to take root. People may still interact with us, but they hold back. They become careful, and trust cannot exist where people feel they must be cautious. Where people feel they must be cautious. Toxic behaviors are often subtle. They're not always explosive or dramatic. Sometimes it's the passive-aggressive comment, the constant need to be right, the dismissive tone, the eye roll. These may seem like personality quirks or stress reactions, but over time they shape the emotional atmosphere we create. That atmosphere either invites people closer or causes them to retreat. And when people retreat, trust goes with them. It's easy to think that trust is built by adding more positive behavior. More kindness, more openness, more communication. Like tending a garden, growth doesn't just come from planting. It comes from pulling the weeds. The soil must be made safe before trust can grow. What makes toxic behaviors dangerous is how often they're rooted in fear. We act in controlling ways because we fear loss of power. We criticize because we fear irrelevance. We withhold praise because we fear comparison. But the fear that drives these habits doesn't stay hidden. Others can feel it. Others can feel it. They may not name it, but they sense the tension, the tightness, the unspoken undercurrent. And when people feel that, they don't trust it. When we begin to remove these patterns, something shifts. People notice. The room softens. They start to test the air. Can I be open here? Can I say what I really think? And when their openness is met with patience instead of judgment, curiosity instead of correction, a kind of quiet confidence begins to form. They no longer feel the need to guard themselves. That's the first real sign that trust is beginning to take root. Removing toxic behaviors is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming aware. It's recognizing when our reactions are doing harm, even when we didn't mean them to. It's choosing to pause before speaking, choosing to ask instead of assume, choosing to own instead of deny. These shifts might feel small, but they change the emotional climate around us. People feel it, and they respond not to our words, but to the safety we create. In teams and relationships, toxicity creates tension even in silence. People begin to edit themselves, avoid conversations, or walk on eggshells. That's not respect, it's survival. When toxic behaviors are present, people give us less of their truth, less of their energy, less of their creativity. But when those behaviors are removed, they start to lean in. They start to share more. They start to trust not just our actions, but our intentions. We often think that earning trust means doing more, proving more, saying more. But sometimes earning trust begins with doing less. Less interrupting, less defending, less judging, less controlling. In the space we create by removing what harms, something much more powerful has room to grow. Connection that isn't forced. Communication that isn't filtered, and trust that isn't fragile. Blame is a reflex. It shows up quickly when we feel cornered, exposed, or embarrassed. It's easier to point the finger outward than to look inward. When something goes wrong, blaming others gives us temporary relief. It protects our ego. It shields us from criticism. It buys us time. But what it doesn't do is help us grow. Blame may defend our pride in the moment, but it costs us credibility in the long run. People watch how we respond to failure. When we blame, we signal that we're more interested in self-preservation than learning. We show that protecting our image is more important than solving the problem. And over time, people notice. They begin to see a pattern. This person never takes responsibility. This person always finds someone else to carry the weight. And slowly, quietly, their respect begins to fade. Ownership does the opposite. It leans in when things go wrong. It says, "That was on me. I missed that. I could have done better." That kind of statement doesn't make someone look weak. It makes them look grounded. It shows maturity. It shows security. People respect those who can acknowledge their role without deflecting. Ownership sends a message. I'm not afraid to face the truth about myself. There's also something magnetic about someone who owns their mistakes. It's rare. It's disarming. In a world full of excuses and finger-pointing, taking responsibility stands out. It invites trust because it shows you're not hiding. It opens the door to dialogue instead of defensiveness. And once people know you're someone who doesn't run from accountability, they begin to offer you more of their trust and their respect. Blame, on the other hand, shuts down progress. It kills feedback. It creates fear. When people know they're going to be blamed, they stop speaking up. They stop experimenting. They focus more on avoiding mistakes than doing meaningful work. In that kind of environment, trust disappears. People don't grow, and neither do the relationships around them. Blame becomes a barrier not just to growth, but to connection. Ownership is a habit, not a personality trait. It's a daily decision to look in the mirror before pointing out the window. It's not about taking blame for everything. It's about owning your part, even if it's small. It's about asking, what could I have done differently? Instead of a why did they screw this up? That mindset shift changes the way people experience us. It makes us accountable. It makes us real. In leadership, this principle becomes even more powerful. A leader who blames creates a culture of fear and silence. A leader who owns creates a culture of resilience and trust. Teams mirror their leaders. If the leader avoids responsibility, so will everyone else. But if the leader steps up, especially when it's uncomfortable, others follow suit. Ownership scales. So does blame. There is no growth without friction, and there is no learning without missteps. Blame tries to smooth over those moments. Ownership enters them. And when people see that you're willing to enter them with humility and honesty, they don't just respect you, they're willing to follow you, learn from you, and stand with you when it's your turn to lead. Most people don't realize when they've taken up too much space in a conversation. They speak with energy, passion, or urgency, thinking they're engaging others, when in reality they're pushing them away. The balance between talking and listening isn't just about manners, it's about connection. When we dominate conversations, we don't just fill the room with our voice, we silence the potential of others. Listening isn't passive. It's one of the most active things you can do. It takes discipline to pause your thoughts and fully take in someone else's perspective. When we fail to do this, when we rush to respond, interrupt, or steer the conversation back to ourselves, we send a clear message. What I have to say matters more than what you're saying. People feel that, even if we don't mean it that way. When we talk too much, we miss what's underneath the surface. People don't always say exactly what they feel, especially at first. They test the waters. They offer small signals. If we're too busy speaking, we miss those signals. We miss the hesitations, the subtle emotions, the unspoken concerns. Listening allows us to hear not just the words, but the meaning behind them. And that's where real connection lives. It can signal that we're not fully hearing the other person. Sometimes people don't need advice. They need to feel understood. And that only happens when we create enough space for them to speak without interruption, judgment, or redirection. In relationships, personal or professional, not listening creates distance. People stop opening up. They begin to edit themselves, shorten their responses, or disengage entirely. It's not because they don't care, but because they don't feel heard. And once someone feels unheard repeatedly, they stop trying. What we interpret as lack of interest might just be exhaustion from not being listened to. There's a certain humility in listening. It's an act of saying, you matter right now, not me. That's a powerful message. It builds respect. It makes people feel seen. And the irony is, the more we listen, the more people are open to hearing us. It's not silence that weakens our voice. It's the lack of listening that weakens our influence. People don't want constant sound. They want mutual presence. Talking less doesn't mean having nothing to say. It means making space for others to speak, and for their voice to matter just as much as ours. When conversations become one-sided, they lose depth. But when both people feel heard, even simple conversation can feel meaningful. Listening turns dialogue into relationship. It's the difference between being surrounded by people and being truly connected to them. In leadership, this principle is critical. A leader who doesn't listen leads from assumption, not understanding. They give orders instead of offering guidance. Their team may comply, but they won't feel inspired. But a leader who listens, who pauses, reflects, and invites input earns not just cooperation, but trust. Because listening isn't just about hearing what people say. It's about showing them they matter. People don't just listen to what you say. They watch what you do. And when your actions don't line up with your words, Confusion begins to set in. One day, you're calm. The next, you're reactive. One day, you're encouraging. The next, you're critical. That unpredictability doesn't go unnoticed. It sends mixed signals, and mixed signals make people uneasy. Over time, they stop knowing which version of you they're going to get. Trust is built on reliability. It's not built on charisma or intelligence or even competence alone. It's built on the ability to show up in a consistent way. When your actions are steady, people begin to feel safe around you. But when your behavior fluctuates depending on your mood, your environment, or who's watching, that safety evaporates. What's left is doubt, not just about what you'll do next, but about who you really are. Inconsistency forces people into a guessing game. They start trying to predict your reactions, calculate their words, or hold back honest feedback. It becomes exhausting. Instead of focusing on collaboration or creativity, they focus on staying in your good graces. That kind of environment doesn't nurture respect. It nurtures caution. It nurtures caution. And when people are cautious around you, the real connection begins to fade. It's not that people expect perfection. They expect alignment. When you say you value honesty but punish people for speaking up, the inconsistency breaks trust. When you preach accountability but avoid responsibility yourself, people start to disengage. Your values lose weight if they're not visible in your behavior. People remember how you acted more than what you promised. In leadership, inconsistency is especially damaging. A leader who shifts expectations, changes priorities without explanation, or reacts emotionally without warning creates instability. That instability doesn't just affect performance, it affects culture. People begin to operate from fear instead of purpose. And when people operate from fear, they start protecting themselves instead of contributing their best. Even small inconsistencies matter. Canceling meetings last minute, saying you'll follow up and forgetting. Giving praise inconsistently. These things might seem minor, but they signal whether you can be trusted. Consistency isn't about rigidity. It's about integrity. It's about showing that your behavior isn't situational, but rooted in principle. That kind of stability invites respect. The hardest place to be consistent is when it's inconvenient. When you're tired, frustrated, under pressure, those are the moments that test whether your actions align with your values. It's easy to be kind when everything is going well. It's harder to be respectful when things go wrong. But those hard moments are exactly when people are watching most closely. Stroll. They reveal your true consistency when people see that you show up the same way, with fairness, clarity, and honesty. Regardless of the situation, they begin to relax. They begin to relax. They begin to open up. They begin to trust that they don't have to protect themselves around you. But when your behavior feels unpredictable, even with good intentions, they retreat. Ego as the voice that says, I already know. It pushes away feedback, avoids discomfort, and insists on being right. It might feel powerful in the moment, but in reality, it builds a wall between us and growth. The ego is not interested in learning. It's interested in protecting identity. And the more we protect that identity, the more we resist anything that challenges it, including the very lessons that could make us better. When ego leads, curiosity dies. We stop asking questions. We start talking over others. We become more focused on winning the conversation than understanding the person. Ego thrives on image, but learning requires vulnerability. It requires saying, I don't know, I was wrong, or I need help. Those aren't signs of weakness, they're signs of openness. They're signs of openness. But the ego doesn't care about being open. It cares about being in control. Humility, on the other hand, creates space for growth. It doesn't mean thinking less of yourself. It means being honest about where you're strong and where you still have room to grow. Humility invites feedback, listens without defensiveness, and seeks to understand instead of dominate. It keeps us grounded, especially in moments of success. Because success without humility breeds entitlement, while humility deepens respect. Now, people admire humility not because it lowers us, but because it lifts others. When we speak with humility, we allow others to contribute. When we lead with humility, we make room for better ideas than our own. It signals that we don't have to be the smartest person in the room. We just have to be someone who's willing to learn. That kind of presence earns respect far more deeply than ego ever could. In environments where ego dominates, learning slows down. Teams become competitive instead of collaborative. Conversations become battles instead of opportunities. People withhold their thoughts, afraid they'll be dismissed or judged. But where humility is present, learning accelerates. People share more. They ask more. They ask more. They take more risks because they feel supported, not scrutinized. The irony is that people with the most to teach are often the most humble. They've seen enough, failed enough, and grown enough to know that they don't know everything. Their experience doesn't inflate their ego. It expands their perspective. They lead not with superiority, but with generosity. And it's that quiet confidence, rooted in humility, that people truly respect. Ego wants to be admired, but admiration isn't something you can demand. It's something you earn through behavior, through consistency, and through humility. When people see that you're willing to learn from anyone, admit mistakes, and grow out loud, they begin to trust you. Not because you claim to have the answers, but because you're willing to keep searching for them. Humility allows us to be human. It removes the pressure to pretend, perform, or posture. It frees us to evolve without shame. And in doing so, it gives others permission to do the same. There's a powerful temptation to want to be right, to prove a point, to win an argument, to come out ahead. It feels good in the moment. Being right gives us a sense of control, of superiority, of certainty. But over time, the constant need to be right can create distance. It turns conversations into competitions. It puts pride over principle. And while people might admire your intellect, they won't necessarily respect your character. Doing right is different. Doing right means choosing integrity over ego. It means admitting when you're wrong, even if you could spin the narrative in your favor. It means choosing what's fair, not just what's beneficial. It means asking, what's best for the relationship? Instead of, how can I win this? Respect grows when people see that you care more about impact than image, more about responsibility than reputation. When you're obsessed with being right, you stop listening. You listen to reply, not to understand. You interrupt, correct, and dominate. The other person might give up, not because they agree, but because they're tired of fighting. That might feel like a win, but it's actually a loss. Because respect isn't won through force, it's offered through trust. And trust can't survive where one person always has to be right. Doing right often requires restraint. It means holding back the "I told you so." It means allowing others to have a voice, even when you think you know better. It means leading with empathy, not just logic. People don't remember every fact you got right. They remember how you made them feel in the process. They remember if you respected them even in disagreement. The most respected people are often the ones who know when to stay silent. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they know the conversation isn't about proving themselves. It's about connection, growth, and mutual understanding. They don't need to remind you how smart they are. Their actions, their decisions, and their humility speak louder than any debate ever could. There are moments when doing right means sacrificing credit. You let someone else shine. You fix a mistake quietly. You step back so others can step forward. These are the moments that define character. People may not see it right away, but over time, they notice. They notice who shows up without needing applause. They notice who chooses what's ethical over what's easy. And that's where real respect is born. Being right can feed the ego, but doing right feeds the relationship. In families, in friendships, in teams, it's not about keeping score. It's about building something that lasts. The people who earn the most respect aren't always the loudest or the smartest. They're the ones who live their values when it matters most. They choose the harder path not because it's impressive, but because it's aligned with who they are. We all have moments where we have to decide, defend our position, or serve the bigger picture. Be clever, or be kind. Prove a point, or protect a connection. These moments shape how others see us. Full lace. Now, not just as thinkers, but as people worth following, worth trusting, and worth respecting.